Basically, if you can do all of these Vamos double stops, you're prepared for any spot that you might encounter in your repertoire. Keep listening to your intonation, and you're going to be a much better violinist on the other side of this journey. Hi, I'm Rachel Barton Pine, and I'm so excited to talk to you about my favorite double stop exercises, the Roland Vamos exercises. For a long time, these actually circulated throughout the world in a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, etc., of this one sheet that just had the basic patterns listed, and you had to know somebody who knew somebody who had studied with Roland to tell you what to do with that sheet. Luckily, there's now a book where it's all written out, and there are even these DVDs. In fact, when people want to buy the book, I always recommend that they get the violin one and the viola one. Because honestly, both of those together cost less than one lesson with somebody like Roland. And what the DVDs do are different from each other. For the violin one, he's giving a lesson to a student. And on the viola one, he just sits in front of the camera and explains the whole thing in one monologue. I think there are very few, if any, splices. He just tells you the whole spiel. And so this video is not a substitute for those because, you know, I can't replicate the genius of Roland Vamos, and he just does it so perfectly. But I am going to tell you a little bit about some of the tips and tricks and ideas that I have about these that maybe go a little bit beyond the basic outline that Roland lays out in his book and his videos. So of course there are a million double stop books, right? I love the melodious double stops of Josephine Trott, and of course the fact that it's fun to have a technique book by a woman composer. Not enough of those in our pantheon. And then of course there's Schraddick double stops, Sevcik double stops, Flesch double stops. Well, it's his scale book, but I think of certain portions of it as essentially a double stop book. We've got the Dunas artist technique and all the double stops in there. The list goes on. But what's really different about Roland Vamos's double stops is that they're fixed double stops, whereas everybody else's are movable double stops involving shifts, string changes, etc. And his are just taking the four fingers on one pair of strings and doing them in every possible combination. And this helps with hand setup, this helps with strength, this helps with coordination. Basically, if you can do all of these Vamos double stops, you're prepared for any spot that you might encounter in your repertoire. Now, these are on the strenuous side, so I want to say right up front, just like when you're practicing things like Dunas or whatever, you should do them only a small amount. You are going to feel strain. I've never met someone who didn't feel strain when they first started doing these. It is very stretchy and taxing. And so don't be tough and keep going. Don't have an idea in your mind of how many minutes you want to do it for, or how many measures you want to cover. When your body starts to protest, listen to your body and stop, because you don't want to hurt yourself. There's nothing worse than practicing more than you should have and then not being able to practice at all because you have to let an injury heal. Of course, you can do the little kind of shake out, right? Because here our blood is flowing away from our hand. It's not even a natural position to be keeping ourselves in over long, and you're working your muscles. So start to feel a twinge, an ache. Just let your hand shake out for a minute. Start to relax. Okay, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. I'll try that again. Still doesn't feel right. Okay, try again in an hour. Still doesn't feel right. Try again the next day. Might be disappointing that you can't progress as fast as you'd want to, but better to have that slow, steady progress, harm-free. So basically, the way that Roland sets them up in the book is that they're all natural notes. A good way to remember that is to think all natural, no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, no preservatives. Okay, that's a really dorky joke, but that's the way that I always remind myself. My food is all natural, and my Vamos double stops are all natural. At least they used to be, and I'll get to that in a moment. So what this means is that as you're going up the string, so basically each finger pattern has 21 different exercises, or 21 different sets of notes. And then each set of note has a set of exercises. So that is 3 pairs of strings times 7 positions. And of course you can go crazy and go higher than that, but that's really not necessary. 7 positions, you're in pretty darn good shape. And the order of the pairs of strings is deliberate. You start with your middle pair, and then you do your fat pair, which you would think, well, why not do A and E next? because in terms of hand setup, it's easier to stay upright and with a good hand shape on the G and D, even though they're fatter strings and you have to work harder to be clean. And then remember to not kind of collapse under the instrument when you're doing the A and E, and that's why those are last, so that you've gotten used to the good hand setup and then just squish your fingers a little to do the A and E. So there are going to be different whole and half step combinations depending on what position you're in and what pair of strings you're on, if you stick to the all natural notes. So taking pattern 1 on the D and A string, which is the very first one you'll encounter. This is 1 on the D, 2 on the A, 3 on the D, 4 on the A, and this is a pair of sixths, right? With inside out, of course, it's an octave and a fourth. You've got a half step down here in first position. Well, that is your most difficult, stretchy position, to have the half step here with the low 2 and then your 3 and your 4. It's very strenuous, and the fact that it's in the first position where the notes are the widest, it's especially stretchy. So I actually like to start students with second and third position, which has a whole step, half step between 3 and 4, and is not nearly as strenuous. Third position, the same as second position. So I do those to get a student used to how the exercise works, and then work your way back down to the first position with the stretchier finger pattern. Another option would be to change the notes, but I like to stick with the all naturals to start with, just because it kind of mixes things up. So your bottom 2 fingers, and I'll go back to the one that's printed in first position just for consistency. Your bottom 2 notes, in this case, first finger, second finger, are what is referred to as your anchor fingers. I can't remember whether Roland uses that term, but I've used that term for decades. So they're your anchor fingers, are the ones that never lift except for 2 specific exercises. So his warm-up exercise is supposed to be done super slowly to find the notes. It's kind of the intonation measure. Of course, you think about intonation with all the measures, but the other measures are for the purpose of strength and coordination. This measure is solely for the purpose of intonation, to just find the notes before you start the real exercises, so to speak. And so what you do is you start with your anchor fingers, which, as I said, don't ever lift except for one particular case. Anchor fingers, then you put the finger on the lower string, you leave it there and put the finger on the upper string, and then you lift off the upper string, and then you lift up the lower string. So you're kind of building up and going back down. Now, what's important to remember is your anchor fingers never change. So here's your 6 that's perfectly in tune. Let's say you set your 3 down and it's not in tune, that double stop is not in tune. You don't adjust your 2, because your 2 has already been locked in place by the fact that if you change your 2, now your 1's not going to match your 2, and it's a whole domino effect. So you only change the new finger, to this case is a 3, to match the 2. Now your third finger is already on the string. You can't change it, or it won't match the 2, which won't match the 1. So when your 4 goes down, you can only adjust the 4. Roland likes to have you do this slidey thing. I kind of slide the fingers around a little. It both makes sure that your hand is not tightening up, but also makes sure that you can adjust your intonation when needed. Basically, there are 4 double stops that you can get from your 4 fingers, and the intonation measure only gives you 3 of them. So I've actually invented a second intonation measure, which is the inside out. So you would do first, you would put down the finger on the upper string, and then the lower string, and then lift off the upper string, lift off the... I'll demonstrate them for all of the patterns quickly here, so that you can make note of what they are. So here's Roland's intonation measure, and the extra intonation measure. And then for pattern 2, which is your set of 7ths, here's his. You can also do that's particularly important for the first 2 patterns, because That's an octave, and again, that's an octave. So the missing double stop from Roland's intonation measure is an octave. So it's important to be able to find this finger and then this finger, and also this finger and then this finger. Okay, moving on to pattern 3, which is a fourth and a sixth. You can also do and then pattern 4, which is your thirds. You can also do pattern 5, which is a sixth and a fourth. And then pattern 6, which is 2/4. Ooh, that's a hard one, especially with the half step between 2 and 1. You have to bring my elbow out a little, even though I'm on the D and A string, and that is perfectly fine. And you can also do and then, of course, fingered octaves, which are the same kind of idea as pattern 2, except stretched out. So your sevenths and your octaves, same finger pattern, but different notes. You can also do all right, so those are the extra intonation measures, which I highly recommend. Now, when you're starting to learn the exercise measures, it's always good to do them in pairs. In fact, I'll have a student do just the first 2 exercise measures for however many weeks it takes. 6 weeks, doesn't matter. Just those first 2 exercise measures until they've got them good. Because really, the next 2 exercise measures are just a doubling up of the first 2. So if the first 2 aren't good, why are you even going to play the next 2? So we have and then remember, the student is usually starting in second and third before going back down to first because it's less strenuous. So the reason that we stick on this for a while is to make sure that the coordination is good, because a lot of times people get these little extra notes right here. You have your anchor fingers down and it's just your 3 lowering and raising, but here your 3 has to raise at the exact moment that your 4 goes down. They have to have a completely simultaneous exchange. And a lot of people, I don't like demonstrating wrong things because it can give you bad habits, but I'll do it just this once, just for you guys. This kind of thing, where your 3 stays a little too long and you get this little da-da in there. So there's all kinds of ways that your fingers can not quite lower and not quite do that exact same moment exchange. So that's what this is really, really working on, and it's hard to do. And sometimes you have to just stand there and actually do it for the student, like make their 3 lift and their 4 go down with your own hand or hands so that they get the idea of what they're supposed to achieve. And it can take a while, but they will get it. I've never met somebody who didn't eventually get it. And so those are the first 2 bars. And then, of course, the next 2 bars are just a doubling up. So they have twice as many of these simultaneous exchanges. So you can imagine if somebody's not good at it yet, they would go, right? And what's the point of that? So wait till first 2 are good, then do these 2, and don't go on to the next ones yet. Just now we're doing 4 exercises. Then add the 5th and 6th, which are the 2 fingers going down simultaneously, which is a whole new skill. The 2 non-anchor fingers, raising and lowering at the exact same moment, and then the continuous exchange, where they're alternating every single note. Okay, now we're up to 6 exercises. Maybe this is 2 months in. The student is going to feel like, oh my God, I haven't even gotten through one position on one pair of strings of one pattern. Am I ever going to finish this book before I'm in my grave? Well, yes, because it sails along a lot more quickly once you've gotten this very first one. This is the big roadblock. Once you can do this, you can do all of its friends up and down the fingerboard, over on the other strings, and then even the other patterns. You've got the idea of kind of how it works. So take as long as this first one needs, but don't despair. All right, and then of course, he has these ones where the anchor fingers lift, but they lift cleanly and simultaneously. So it's the same notes as measures 5 and 6, but with the lifting of the anchor fingers. And he explained to me that he only added this after having taught it for many, many years, because he realized that for purposes of shifting and stuff, if you're doing something like, well, there you would hold them down, but if you're going, there are just various contexts in which you need to lift them in order to shift or set them down someplace else. If you're doing, some passage, you need to have that action available to you and comfortable. Now, what's really annoying is that you can have the 5th exercise perfectly in tune with the anchor fingers staying down like they normally do. And then you go to the 7th exercise where they lift, same exact notes, and you can be wildly out of tune, and you're like, wait a sec, what the heck happened? Well, I can guarantee you that that will happen. It's rare that it doesn't. And it's just because it's a different feel for the fingers to have to find their spot again and again and again. Even the non-anchor fingers are coming from the air instead of being on top of the other guys. It's just different physical motion, and so you have to find your pitches all over again. And usually people who've gotten to a pretty medium tempo with these never go super fast, but they don't have to stay super slow once you've gotten good at them. But usually those 2 measures where the fingers lift, most people do play those more slowly than they do all the other measures, just because they are that much harder. And especially this one. This one is also lifting and setting with the 2 pairs of fingers exchanging at the exact same moment, and each pair of fingers involves 1 anchor finger and 1 non-anchor finger, only in this case, of course, nobody is anchoring anything. And then those 2 measures at the end are just for the purpose of relaxing your hand, shaking it all out. All right, so that's the general idea of how it goes, and some of these patterns can be a little confusing. It's nice that Roland has the book where it's all written out, so you don't have to try to remember, okay, this one is a 3 over here and a 4 over here, and what should it be, and stuff like that. What do you do when you've finished the book and you've mastered all these double stop patterns? Okay, hi, see you in 5 years.